Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Mind, Your Reality, Your Results, a weekly live show where I speak with an expert in the subject of mindset so you can change your mindset and ultimately get the amazing results that you want in your life. Today, I'm so happy to be joined by Dr. Deb Goldberg. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Leah. It's really nice to be here. Just a temporary kind of situation for me in my office, but I'm hoping it works out well. Um, we talked about the title of this family of origin, and they lied. And I started thinking about that. My background, I didn't even start being a therapist till I was 42. I've been in the field almost 30 years now. And I realized that people can start at whatever age and start looking at their family of origin. And that's my specialty. Family of origin is the family that you grew up in, where you learned your coping strategies, how to do conflict or not. Everybody does it, right? It's just how. Um, and then also how you learned about your values, your principles, your morals, all of those things that are your parents. Actually, they're not yours yet. And you don't own those until later on in life. And that's when you realize, were they lying to me? Or was this real? So you have your own experience in life that will give you some contrast to be able to decide whether or not what your parents' values, principles, and morals are fit for you. So the idea that behind the work I do is to really help people with some options to do it differently, just to show a different perspective, if you will, a different angle, to look at the motives behind why your parents did what they did. And I am 100% believer that parents do the best they can in any given moment and any given day. And we can look back and go, God, I wish I'd have done that differently. But
Yeah.
in the long run, if that makes sense to you, it does to me. In fact, here's what I did is I've been collecting all this information, and I thought, I should really write a book, because I realized I'm actually from Seattle, Washington, and I grew up there near the rainforest. And then I moved to Minnesota, to the frigid zone, okay, where it would be 60 below in February. And now I'm down in El Paso, Texas, and it's like, I like it here best. It's, is the rainforest great? Sure it is. Is it gray? Yes, it is. Does it sunshine here 35 days a year? Liking that idea. So what I've been working on in all these different cultures that I've been in is, gosh, this really ties into a book. And so I've been putting stuff together, and culturally as well as in general, and what is the common denominator in human behavior. And so I'm writing that now, right, too. So I'm excited about that. But the family of origin is, we all have it. It's just what we do with it and what we do next because of it. So how's that for understanding, a brief thumbnail of it?
I think it's fantastic, and we're going to dive into this today. I really encourage people, if you're watching and you have questions for Deb, this is a great time to get them answered. So feel free to put them in the comments, and we can get to them. Even if you're not watching this live, you can put those pieces in the comment box, because we can get back to you even after this show has aired. So what I really liked, because I had the pleasure, obviously, of meeting you before we were on the show here,
Mm-hmm.
is what you talked about as the primary piece and motivator behind human behavior. Do you want to share a little bit about what that is?
Sure. Well, my experience, so I can only go from my experience as a therapist, is that people have what I call core drivers. And those drivers are the things that they've learned in their family to be able to adapt and live in their family, which doesn't necessarily mean it works when you create a family. And that's why you can have two people in the same family have a completely different experience and perceive things differently. And let me kind of give you a backstory about that first, because everybody has a different essence. Who you are, how you are, is very different. That's what makes us unique. That's what makes us unique. And in that is also our sense of self. Now, how that sense of self grows is really determined by how our parents value mind, body, and spirit. So if your parents are academics, they're going to really want you to be more about your brain rather than your body or your spirit. So of course you're going to propel in that area, because if you don't, you become an outcast in the family. Well, everybody wants to belong, which is part of what I'm getting ready to kind of point at, which would be inclusion, that you're part of something. Well, if you look at the inclusion piece and you go out into the world and you're not a high academic, you're going to feel less than. All right. So that is going to jump in front of you anytime you have a pretty much a major decision to make that takes critical thinking. You're going to think that you're not that. And so that inclusion piece is really big. So now you're going to go outside yourself to try and feel included. So that's why kids go to maybe drugs, or people, they start, let's say, a walking group, or they go into, I don't know if you remember when kids were doing goth, everything was black. I mean, that's about belonging. And that's because not feeling of belonging in your family. So these kinds of things are, let's say, in your family, it's where it's supposed to grow, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be evenly. Like I said, if your parents are academic, if your parents are bodybuilders, if they're into physical sports, they're going to really want to accent your body. So you're going to do the things that gives you the kudos, because that helps your ego grow, right? But in the meantime, your academic might fall back, or your sense of spirit, which if you're an artist, how many of us have heard you can't make a living on art, or why don't you do that on the side? Or whatever it is, which is a discouragement for your creativity, right? So that kind of splashes your spirit. It's an oppressive kind of experience, but because we need to belong, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, top of the list is belonging and being part of a clan. So we search for that. But the other things that I've also noticed is that if a family member, let's say they're not as bright as the rest of the family, they won't feel like they matter. So now we've got inclusion, do I matter? And then it comes into, oh gosh, will I ever be enough? So then I look at enough, okay? Now you look at it and you go, wow, I'm not as smart as my sister or my brother or my parents, okay? And now I just don't feel safe to be me. So then that creates a safety issue. So that's 4, right? And so what happens is through all that, your little spirit suffers. And little pieces of that spirit kind of like jump out in orbit, if you will. I don't know, however you want to put it, but it goes away because it's out of survival and a primal need to continue to be who you are. Yeah. Okay, so far so good?
Totally.
Okay, so then the kind of last 2 things that I look at are rejection and abandonment. Now, all of these, I think, tie together at some level. But in my book, what I want to do is be able to separate out each one so that a person can really make the distinction of what is doing what in your life and what's making your decisions, what's really leading. I can give you a personal story if that's okay. Is that right? All right. So I'm the last of 6 kids. And so my sisters drugged me around and they didn't want to, right? So, but I was okay. And plus, I've always been kind of an odd duck because of my approach to things. And how it's in my bones to kind of look at things and go, how come? Why is that? I mean, I've questioned authority since I was a little kid. So as a result of that, I've been excluded in a lot of ways. So inclusion became kind of a driver for me to want to be part of things. Okay, so I took my roundabout drugs and alcohol when I was a kid. I took the road of I'll be an academic, and that didn't feel right. That's why I didn't finish my master's until I was 42, is I just thought, oh, I'm just not smart enough, right? But that bottom line was I was a lot smarter and brighter than a lot of people. But because I couldn't read, I had dyslexia. So on top of dyslexia, I'm an ADDer, which is a benefit now. It's not a liability, it's an asset. And what happened is I flunked 4th grade because I couldn't read. And as a result of that, I felt stupid, but I knew I wasn't, at that core level, at that essence. But I kept moving forward, right? Well, I kept going into groups that were not good for me. And because I wanted to be part of. And so as a result, in my mid-20s, I used to have barbecues. And I was going to have a nice big barbecue. And I wanted to make sure everybody felt like they were included. So if I went to the grocery store and I liked the checker, I'd say, hey, I just live half a mile up the road. You want to come to my barbecue? Well, you can kind of imagine what happened. I mean, I had a nice little volleyball net set up, a barbecue pit, fire pit. We're good, right? Well, the next morning, and I look at that, that whole day, I'm thinking, I look around, I said, like, who are these people, right? They're only people I've just met. 125 people in my backyard. And I can tell you, out of those 125, they all knew my name was Deb. But the people that actually knew me, maybe 25. But I had just, no matter where I went, I just invited all these people, maybe 50. I mean, I had been there for 20 years. So, but the bottom line is inclusion would jump in front of anything that was happening for me if I didn't feel part of it. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but it was huge for me. And I didn't find my pod, what I call my pod, until I was in my 50s when I went back for my doctorate. And so my doctorate's in energy medicine, which is the non-invasive types of healing. And when I realized that was an option, there were my people. Because I always talk frequency, energy, quantum physics. I mean, there was all of that fascinated me. And then I found my pod, which now I can apply that to a person's spirit. How does energy impact a person's spirit? And so my primary work now is helping people refine who they are after they've lost themselves. I do a women's retreat, and it's called, I said, what does it say? Who am I after I met you? And I go, wow, that's a great title. Who am I after I met you? Because of all the influences of other people in my life. And I really realized that there's other people out there that have the same. And so now, with COVID and people staring at their navels for 2 years, right? They're going like, who am I? And my job is to say, who have you been conditioned to be? Because who we are is how we project ourselves in the world. Doesn't mean that is who we are. That means who we've been trained to be. So now a lot of people are going, wait a second, that doesn't fit for me. That's not me. Yet some people say, well, I know you. And you know what? How can they know you when you don't even know you? I don't know. It makes sense to me, right? So my book is the idea is to help people understand that these core drivers will create a havoc for them unless they figure out what the source of that is. And a lot of people in my experience of living in 3 different cultures now. So I've got the Northwest, the Midwest, and now the Southwest, that people's passive behavior or fear of rejection will not let them speak their truth. And every time you don't speak your truth, you're giving up a piece of who you are, which could be driven by not feeling included or fear of abandonment. So you can see how it all ties in, which fascinates me. I'm sure it's not the best topic for everybody else, but to me, it's just like it just keeps me moving forward in this field. It's manna for me. I'd like to make it like a manual, like an owner's manual. Like, okay, you've got this driver. Take a look at where it came from. Why? Because there's always a reason, Leah. There's always a reason behind why you do what you do. And the bottom line is the good news, it's conditioned probably. So you can unlearn it. Just learn behavior, unlearn it. That's all you need to do. But ferreting that out is the secret. And that's where family dynamics come in. So your family dynamics play out in your adult relationships. Can be with friends, can be with work, can be in your marriage, children, especially with your children, because at certain ages, what happened to you, 8 years old, will come to the foreground of your mind when that child kind of, let's say they hurt themselves and you go, wow, I remember that pain. The emotional pain or the physical pain, spiritual pain, right?
Yep.
I mean, Montessori is one good way of having children say, be who you are. They're very free with, where's your accent? What do you do best? What can you contribute? Well, and that is when you look at the bigger picture, that's what we all need to be doing with our children is, hey, who are you? And that's before you met me, because in my mind, our essence is very, let's say, we come in whole, and then we part ourselves out, if you will. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I love it. I have so many thoughts. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show and I loved speaking with you is because I feel there is a lot of alignment in the way I approach my work and see the world. Like 2 things that come to mind as an overall idea. You call them drivers, I call them needs.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of work, and I've worked a lot with both nonviolent communication and the Circle of Courage. And the Circle of Courage, particularly, very similar to you, says we have 4 core needs. So they have belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. And as you mentioned, like when people can't get those needs met in a healthy way because their family have taught them, because their supports have taught them, they will find a way to get them met. And it might not be healthy. And so I'm 100% with you on that. And as we grow up and develop different needs, we're always constantly reaching out for ways to meet them, whether they're healthy or unhealthy. So 1,000,000% on that. I also really like that you talked about, same thing, maybe a slightly different language. I would use personality typology. So personality types, and that's something I work a lot with, and helping people understand, especially parents, like you've said, if you're an organized, structured person and you have a kid who's the really like in the moment, playful, spontaneous kid, and you start just browbeating them about how they have to be more organized and regulated, like you said, it's a judgment that you're placing on them of how they should be. And in my mind, it is the responsibility absolutely of the parents to adapt to support their children and their children's gifts and whatever those are, not to try to conform the child into whatever they think is best. So I'm 100% with you on all of this. So you mentioned talking about, what are the first steps really that you can take to figure out this why, or to start understanding how your family of origin affected you? Do you have any tips for people?
Well, first let me back up just a little bit, because when you talked about needs, and that you kind of reframe it, to me, a need and a want are very different. Okay, a need is something that you need in order to reach your potential or put meaning to life. Okay, so I need to be who I am. Okay, and there's a little joke out there that says everybody else is taken, right? So the bottom line is, how do I become more of who I am, right? And so you're right, you're spot on about parents being observant of what is it that their child likes to do and what is it that they do well, and who are they individually. Okay. Well, all of that, in my mind, where are you going to find out the answers to that? You're going to have to go back into your family and go, okay, so why did they do it that way? Because your parents had a reason to do it that way. And which brings me to the next piece, which is they only do what they've been taught, right? In order to change a family dynamic or pattern, you have to go back 3 generations, and then it becomes a pattern. Once you identify the pattern, you identify the dynamic underneath that pattern, and from there, you could look for the intent behind it. Okay, here's really an old story, okay, about how this family of origin piece works. So the mom is teaching the 15-year-old daughter, how to cook a roast. I suppose most people have heard this story, but I'm going to use it because it's a great analogy. So mom cuts the end off the roast, puts it in the pan. Okay. The kid looks at the mom and says, "Why did you cut the end off the roast?" And she says, "Well, that's the way I was taught. Why don't you call grandma and ask her?" So she calls grandma and she says, "Grandma, when you put a roast in the pan, why do you cut the end off?" And she says, "Well, that's how Grandmama taught me." "Well, Grandmama, why don't you call her and ask her?" She says, "Okay." So it's Grandmama on the line. She says, "Grandmama, why did you cut the end off the roast when you put it in the oven?" She says, "It was always too small." And as a result of that, the reason was because the pan was too small. That's it. So if you can go to the source of why, that'll give you an understanding. And then there'll be a relief inside that says, I'm not wrong for asking, because that's part of my curious side. But also, I'm not wrong because I want to know the information. Okay? So it leads you, it's like a domino effect, Leah. It's very logical human behavior. What's illogical is the reactive emotion behind it. So if a person is, let's say, not sure of themselves, their self-worth is really low. If you challenge them, they're going to be defensive. What are they defending? They're defending their very essence, because it's been so hit on so many times, oppressed so much, that by the time a person gets defensive, there's a lot of conditioning behind that. Okay. In that conditioning, what we're going to look at is a dynamic, which is the underlying undertow of something that actually was, let's say, assaulting to the essence. Not intentionally. Remember, so much of this is unconscious. So let's say there's a dynamic that's coming through the family, and the first time it happens, like the first time you didn't feel included. I think the biggest hit for me was when I flunked 4th grade. Okay. And that's where I felt stupid. And the bottom line was, I went to the roster, I looked, my name wasn't on it. My friend Margaret looked at the roster and she said, your name's not on there to the 5th grade. So we went back to the 4th grade and there was my name again. Margaret turned around and walked away. She wasn't my friend anymore because 5th graders don't hang out with 4th graders, right? That's the first wound, all right? As I got older and I became ADD in spades, right? I would bounce off the walls, high energy kid. You know, my mom took me to the doctor. Back then they didn't have Adderall, right? Because we're talking 60 years ago, right? So you go back and that kid, you know, what's wrong? What's wrong with your kid, right? Well, that's another hit. Well, what happens, Leah, is there's an exponential quality to the impact of that on an individual's spirit. So as a result, then what kicks in? Am I good enough? Am I okay? And the message to get back is, no, there's something wrong. Well, when I finally realized there was nothing wrong with me, it's just who I am, and that's okay, and I get to be, and not everybody's going to like me, I was good with that. And I have a pod, you know, I call my few people in my inside circle. And so the way that I got through it was I went to therapy. When my mom passed away, she left us an inheritance. It got distributed twice a year. My therapist waited for payments, and twice a year she got her payments, and that's where my inheritance went for the first 3 years. I just said, you know what? My mom helped screw me up. She can help unscrew me up, and that was my take on it. So that's how I got back actually into being a therapist. It never was my kind of aspiration, if you will. I didn't even open my practice till I was 42. So, and it was in Minnesota, which is a great place to practice. You know, I've never been without work because of the cultural norms. And it's not a slam on Minnesota. It's really just not. It's just that there's cultural norms there that are Nordic, right? They're people that in the cold regions, and they act very different than the people from the rainforest, as do the people from Southwest, in El Paso here. So does that answer your question? It's really a domino effect. You really have investigative kind of curiosity.
Yeah, it definitely does. And of course, we're talking about it like it's easy work. Obviously, you put in the time through therapy and your own exploration.
Yeah.
I've also done that time throughout, you know, most of my life. So I can very much appreciate that. And I think to speak to one of the other points, which you've kind of skirted on, is people, I think especially nowadays, are recognizing more and more kind of their found family. So some people who have maybe potentially very toxic relationships with their family of origin, or even people who are still in connection with their family of origin, but are also looking for their people, right? You talk about your pod.
Right.
There is incredible power in finding belonging, however you can find belonging. So like I talked about with personality types, one of the first things we do is celebrate. Like you go into a pod of your people, or, you know, whether that's your analytical people or your social people or your spontaneous people or your organized people. And so many of those traits that you mentioned, you've probably been told, you know, you're not worthy, you're not good enough. And you start taking these on, you suddenly have a bunch of people around you that are saying, oh, that's me too.
Right.
And you suddenly go, oh, well, someone judged me for this my whole life, but there's this whole group of people who also feel this way, appreciate this, have this as a strength. And you start going, wow, maybe this isn't a bad thing. And it's experiences like those that, because it's really hard to fully cultivate your own sense of belonging by yourself.
You can't do it by yourself.
You can't, right? And so finding those people that maybe have similar values and passions can reaffirm that those are good things. However you do that is such a powerful tool along the way.
Right. That's exactly right. See, and that is what you're doing is you're looking for people that are like-minded, not necessarily like you, but have a same kind of a, let's say, feeling of like not belonging or rejection, all those 5 cores that I really named. And so what happens is when you're in a group, you say, wow, good. There's an exhale that says, I'm not broken. I'm not wrong. I am just me. And that conditioning has helped me to become me. But again, you look back and you go, okay, so now that I'm not alone, because what is it about human beings is we don't want to be alone. We want to have time to ourselves. That's different. then you go into personality of ambivert, introvert, extrovert, okay, and how we restore our energy. Well, in that group of the group of people that you find where you have a core issue or core value, if you will, you can align with them. And that's how we learn from each other. We get feedback from somebody. That's how you learn. People that don't want to tell you that, oh, by the way, do you know you do this? One of the workshops I did for IT organization is I did a keynote for them, and it was about people that interrupt, all right? And people don't know it unless somebody says something. And they think that their urgency to be able to speak might be an ADD moment, okay? But what you realize as you're moving on is that ADD can also help you focus. It doesn't have to be right now. But once you realize that you're with other people that have ADD and they look at it like it's a problem, I can tell you that it used to be because my social skills were like, oh my God, a bull in a china shop. Hey, you guys, I got to tell you this, and it's like, wait, chill, Deb, chill, all right? Focus. And that's why I can look at, various levels, or let's say, do you believe in animal medicine? Do you believe
in which, sir?
Animal medicines? Where there's the medicine like owls or dolphins or deer or any of that give you messages about how your personality is or how you are. Have you ever?
I've heard of it. I haven't gone very deeply into it.
Okay. Well, I can tell you I have owl medicine. Well, owl medicine is the ability to see in the night. It's the ability to see beyond where people normally see. So it's perfect for my work, right? Because I can look in and go, okay, so what is the driving force behind that? Where did you learn that? Why? And that voice in your head, guess what? Lied to you. It's not really yours. It's your mother's, or it's your father's, or it's your sister, or your brother, or your uncle, people that had influence with you. So my job is to ferret out which voice are you really listening to? Which one are you going to act on? The one that's true to you, or the one that helps you feel included, or helps you feel safe, or that you matter? You see how that works?
Totally. Well, and I think something that's important to mention on top of that as well is, we talked about finding your group.
Mm-hmm.
And your group generally is going to have those aligned values, maybe some aligned pain, and they'll be the easy people to communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have that validation, that belonging, then it's also easier to connect with other people.
Yes.
Because I certainly don't want to say to anyone, once you find your group, that's it. You only have to be like-minded people. And in that, it's once you get those validation pieces or belonging pieces from somewhere, it's much easier to say, hey, Deb, your way of being is a little bit different than mine. But since I'm confident in who I am, I no longer have my parents saying, or whatever it is, then I can connect with you on a different level. And that to me is a really powerful thing.
Well, that's that self-actualization, isn't it? It's really when you come into your own. So you look at emancipation, you look at individualization, you look at the like you're saying, how you integrate into yourself who you are by other people's feedback or let's say reaction to you. Yeah. And in that process, you begin to really say, okay, this is me, this isn't me. It's funny because people that really know me, like I can have a calm demeanor, or I can just go off the charts get so excited about stuff. But I have learned that what happens is it's contagious, but at the same time, it can scare people that are more, let's say not as high energy. Let's put it that way. Okay. But I refuse to be small anymore. I absolutely refuse it. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to, if you don't like how my energy is, and I'm really not encroaching on your boundaries or, anything about your world, don't be around me. It's okay. It's okay. And what makes it okay is that I'm okay with me. Finally, I just hope it doesn't take everybody else 50 years, because the bottom line, I think COVID has really expedited this process. I think it's really made people say, what's important to you? And in my mind and in my heart, what's most important to me is how you love and your legacy of love and what you leave behind. I think, isn't it, oh gosh, I think Maya Angelou, it has the saying about people won't remember what you do. They won't remember how you do it, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Yep.
Isn't it? I know it's something like that. But that is true.
Yeah.
So to me, there's two things that are most precious: your time and how you love. So how you spend that time with somebody and being who you are, fully showing up. That's my comment.
Well, that is a beautiful thought. I'm so sad because we are coming to the end of our time, but I think that's just an absolutely beautiful thought to end on. And I just really appreciate our conversation today. If anyone heard this and is like, I'm loving who Deb is and I want to work with her or have any questions, we have her contact information in the description there. So please do feel free to reach out from her website. It's got everything on there. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today. This was just fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, Leah, for inviting me. I was guessing about it a little bit, but you know what? You make it so easy to just move forward. So thank you again.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that feedback. I hope everyone here has a good week. And remember, every thought counts. We'll see you next week.